and new models in the industry. This is an opportune time for updating and creating more innovative strategic long-term plans that will be much more beneficial to the major stakeholders, the people. We must start looking at tourism as a business, debunk the perception that hospitality is synonymous with charity. Long-term plans for success and sustainability must take the following into consideration. Health and hygiene will now be an important factor for the post-pandemic tourist. As such, more emphasis can be placed on health tourism. Greater control to avoid oversupply of hotel room inventory, and I make a reference to the Bermuda model. Ensure appropriate balance of all-inclusive and EP properties, thus allowing for greater participation, share in the earning potential for other non-hotel businesses, like attractions, restaurants, craft shops, etc. I make a reference to the Barbados model. Tighten controls of duty-free shops. Data on average spend per shopper in a duty-free shop is embarrassing. Promote agriculture, other industries to increase export potential and strengthen food security and foreign exchange earnings. Don't put all the eggs in the tourism basket. Exploit opportunities from the cruise industry market, which may be the hardest tourism sector. Create a mandatory disaster fund, say 2% of gross revenue, backed by risk-free investments. Much of the tourism industry financial strategies does not factor in saving for the rainy day. Review insurance policies to ensure adequate coverage for such disasters. The pandemic has brought into sharp focus the inefficiencies and shortcomings in various sectors. But we can use lessons learned to shore up, improve, remodel for the better. We must be ready when COVID-19 has passed to rebuild an even better Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you, Eldon. I don't know if any of the other scheduled panelists have joined us. I understand that the Consul General of Trinidad and Tobago in New York has joined us. Is he on? Hello? All right, in the meantime, I understand he was...
Yes, Dr. Curtin, I'm here. And,
sorry, no, I'm not Dr. Curtin, I'm just Wesley Curtin, but thank you for joining us. I don't know that we are seeing you, but I know New York has been very, very, hard hit by this pandemic, and I know the Caribbean diaspora has lost a significant number of people. And give us an update on how the diaspora is doing. The Caribbean diaspora is doing in New York, and I know that with airports and so on closed in the region, there are quite a few Caribbean people who are stranded and seem eager to come home, notwithstanding the need to close the airports and seaports at this time. Your perspective, sir.
Thanks a lot, and thank you, Laverne Mc Gee, our stalwart from the Trinidad and Tobago diaspora, who invited me to this exchange. We have a Caribbean Consular Corps here, CARICOM Consular Corps, and it's chaired by the Consul General of Barbados, Mackie Holder, who's doing a fine job. And we have tried to get together as often as we can to compare notes and see how we all share our experiences as to how we all dealing with COVID-19 here, as well as our experiences back home. I think you'll be well aware of the situation in our region. And so Trinidad and Tobago, we've had just about 114 cases and 8 deaths, and the number of people recovering is increasing, and the deaths have not increased for about 7 days. So we are thankful for that. I think 16 people have recovered and left hospital. So far we are coping okay, relatively okay, but one can never be complacent. I think as everywhere in the world, the main weapon is social distancing, and I think you know what Caribbean people are like when it comes to keeping away from each other. That's always a challenge. There's strong encouragement and urging from as high as the Prime Minister for nationals to keep away from each other. And we're hoping that people do understand their civic responsibility and their own individual significance in this whole exercise. As for here in New York, well, we have shared a bit about our respective experiences, it's very difficult to get accurate figures as to how many of our nationals have died. I know of at least 12 persons, and for some reason, the persons who have died, they're people who have they're really icons in the Caribbean diaspora. In the areas of culture, education, health, and so on. And I could speak also for, well, the same that holds for Trinidad and Tobago holds also for my Caribbean neighbors. They have lost several members of their diaspora, their respective diasporas. There is, many of the cases have been, of course, in Brooklyn and in Queens, where we have a high concentration of our nationals. But we do our bit to ensure, well, to just as our governments do at home, we're doing our bit to encourage people to practice to practice social distancing. To do all of the necessary, to undertake all of the necessary measures and so on to protect themselves and their families, and above all, to having done all, you continue to pray and you trust God, because there's only so much man could do to protect himself. But as with all of the state of New York, really, we are on pause, and the consulates are functioning out of the homes of their officials, really. As for Trinidad and Tobago consulate, we go in only to do the absolute necessities, the payment of bills and pensioners and that kind of thing. But we're functioning as best we can, and we are watching closely as to what decisions are being made at the level of the governor and the federal government. We will, but no matter what, we will do what we require to protect our staff and to protect our nationals. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Consul General. I know there are a number of questions that have come in, but before I go to the questions, I want to ask a few questions myself. Throughout the region, like in other places, there have been tremendous displacement of workers from several sectors. Mr. Samaroo, perhaps might you address how the private sector is dealing? I know, I think Mr. Bremner referred to the possibility or the need, more than the possibility, the need for, to be put in place programs that would at least offer some kind of temporary, payments to displaced workers and so on. Any ideas on how the private sector is or can deal with this in the region?
Yeah, this is really a major issue, particularly as markets contract and companies scale back in response. This is a time that I think companies need to try and find ways as best as possible to retain as many of their skilled people. But inevitably, there will be several, a significant number of persons who could lose their job during this time. And I think, I believe the governments need to sort of try to find a way of providing some sort of stipend to keep people going during the few months until such time that they can regain employment. And I do make this statement recognizing fully the fragility of the regional economies. But I believe government must also work with the private sector and provide some sort of incentives, tax reliefs, etc. So to encourage companies to retain their employees as much as they can, and use this period for retraining and doing other things that generally you cannot do while you're operating. In the case of the distillery operation, which is a 24 hours operation, the curfew that has been implemented in several countries has created some sort of challenge, but companies are working around those. And while at this point in time, I cannot speak for everybody, but certainly for the organizations with which I'm associated, there is really no plan to lay off people, but to keep them going. And hopefully by the time this is over, we should be able to get back on even keel. So basically, it's a difficult situation between the government and the employers. We need to find a way of keeping people, having a source of income so they can live.
Is there anyone else in the panel that would want to address that? Perhaps Dr. Slater can tell us if there's any regional approach on the part of the government.
Well, certainly the various member states are cognizant of these challenges, and the Council of Ministers of Trade and Economic Development, the COTED, have been having discussions along those lines, where we hope to use the opportunity to encourage, as I mentioned earlier, especially in the area of food security. It's an opportunity for us to really take a relook, but a serious one this time, in having the manufacturing sectors of our region stepping up to the plate to address some of those issues. I also will say that even in terms of some of the medical supplies, one of the questions asked earlier in some of our meetings was, do we have any member states with the capacity to provide some of these supplies that are very scarce on the international market? And I think that's another area that we need to work collaboratively to find out. I know I've read about some member states manufacturing using technology like 3D technology to address some of the equipment that are needed. Issue of mass, even though the use of mass is a bit nebulous, but yes, generally the public health officials are not discouraging. I put it that way, but we need masks. They are scarce internationally, but